Welcome back. It's Laurence McKenna's channel talking about Liverpool in their Europa League group and the academic game at the end of it, but a big finish for Liverpool and USG. I always want to make sure I get that right because it's an unusual name, but you know, it is what it is. They still beat Liverpool 2-1, and that is how people will see the result reflected. Liverpool have only lost to a couple of teams this season. Spurs, Toulouse, and now USG. So all of those, by the way, have very different impacts on the side, and we will talk about each of those losses. But the point was that in a Europa League group that Liverpool pretty much sailed through, and as a side that probably won't care all that much about coefficient, though probably could care a little bit more about coefficient, considering the positions they found themselves in recent years. And it would have been great if in recent years we'd have had that fifth place position because Liverpool wouldn't find themselves in the Europa League position, but they do. The point being, Liverpool have made it through their Europa League group quite simply, quite easily, and find themselves, how many points did they finish on? 10? Line at standings? Yeah, 12. 4 wins, 2 losses, one of which wasn't really a loss, and the other one wasn't really a loss. I was at the Toulouse game, like that wasn't a handball for McAllister. That wasn't, I mean, it was a poor result. It was definitely a poor performance in the first half, and probably in the second as well, even though they came back in that half, but wasn't all that poor of a performance. And here's the thing about Liverpool playing a load of juniors or, you know, I guess sub-senior players, like just, they are senior players. Harvey Elliott is a senior player, Curtis Jones is a senior player, but none of these guys are kind of like solid starting lineup players, apart from probably Ibrahim Konate, Joe Gomez, Endo at a push. You could say Elliott starts, Curtis Jones probably, Cody Gakpo, but even then, Gakpo hasn't been starting all that many games recently. So it was a weird mishmash of Liverpool seniors and Liverpool juniors. And I loved some of the Liverpool juniors, but frankly, I think this shows a lot about how Klopp is used to deploying his team and how he's trying to deploy his team more and how he's trying to make them a little bit cheekier, give them a little bit more first team experience, see what they're capable of. And I don't really think that like you look at it and it looked like a preseason side, right? You look at it and it looked like a team that was there for training. The team was, you know, it was nice. It was good. It's always good to see some of those junior players. It's always good to see a Gordon back in the team. It's always good to see, I do enjoy watching Ben Doak, but I didn't really enjoy it all that much tonight. He managed to get a couple of tackles out of some people. Never really managed to muster that much of a shot. Cody Gakpo, I'm a big fan of his, but was he really the striker that we needed on with these other guys? More of a facilitator? Maybe Liverpool are just trying to test him in that role. The midfield, I mean, it didn't really ever control the game in the way that you thought maybe Curtis Jones, Ratu, Endo, and Harvey Elliott could. But it certainly had moments where you were like, yeah, that was okay. That was fine. It was just a fine game for it. It wasn't like it was like exceptional. It wasn't like it was like, hey, we badly need this win. And you get the feeling that if they did badly need something else, then they probably would have fielded a different team. But ultimately, USG finished third in the group, 4 points off Liverpool, 3 points behind Toulouse, and Liverpool make it through quite comfortably. Especially if you go to statistics in this game. Like they had 2.3 XG, Liverpool literally had 0.29 over 2 halves of football. And that was after bringing on Darwin Núñez. That was after, let me just look at what point Liverpool brought on Darwin Núñez, right? Darwin Núñez came on 63rd minute, McConnell came on, Scanlon was on, Ibrahim Konate went off and Joe Gomez came on, Watu Endo went off, and on comes Ryan Gravenberch, who actually I thought is probably Liverpool's man of the match at one point, or at least man of the match most prominent moments. Again, don't dig too deep into a game like this, but it probably shows you that Liverpool are trying to preserve legs throughout the season. Look at teams who have gone out, Manchester United and Newcastle United, both going out because neither of them had the legs, neither of them had the energy, neither of them had the momentum. Both sides were struggling to field a team that they thought would be as confident, be as destructive as it needed to be, and it served both of them badly in the end. Liverpool don't want to suffer that same fate. They want to be able to go into the Manchester United game on Sunday fresh. They want to have players who feel a little bit more confident. They want to have players who, probably on the back of a loss for the overall club, not necessarily this squad, but also then probably the squad as well, considering that you want to keep them together, you want to make them feel like they're one unit. They want to go into a Manchester United game feeling confident. They want to go into a Manchester United game feeling we need to avenge that loss, we need to come in strong, we need to come in hot off the back of that. And I don't mind that. I think Klopp sacrificed this game a little bit in order to just keep the momentum of the season and to an extent show we got 12 points. No one's touching us in this group. Liverpool finished top. Overall, if you look at the results this season, I don't think Liverpool have ever really had to exert themselves all that much. Sure, there have been some comebacks. Sure, that in the Toulouse game, they probably should have got one more point. In the Toulouse game, they probably should have never let it to get to that point in the first place. But it is what it is. And this competition is very much, despite the fact that, by the way, Klopp has never won it before, and I think the goal tonight was actually Klopp's 2000th competitive goal as a manager, not just as Liverpool manager, but as a manager. There's kind of there are some big landmarks in there. So who was the player who scored Klopp's 2000th competitive goal? Jurel Quansah. Actually, that was my man of the match this evening. Someone who I think is on the fringes of being in the Liverpool first team a bit more permanently, or at least in the Liverpool first team squad a bit more permanently. We'll probably see one of that four who make up the two in Virgil van Dijk, Konate, Joe Gomez and Matip. Overall, moving on, probably Joel Matip, though it does look like they're going to offer him a new contract now, so fantastic. But at the same time, it's good to have those backups. It's good to have young players that, again, like 8.1 in terms of ratings for games, being leaders out on the field, being more than just a squad member, being a player that is going to push senior members further than they need to be going. Someone who, when you bring him on as a sub, isn't just like, oh, we need to cover for this guy for the next X amount of minutes. Is someone that when we look for depth in a team, that's exactly what we're talking about. Quansah has more than stepped up to the plate. Quansah has more than fulfilled and filled the boots of those other players who were ahead of him. He has been fantastic throughout the season. And despite the fact they scored 2 goals, despite the fact that Liverpool were playing this high line, playing weird positions, trying to find a way to just break that team down, were taking risks, were doing things that you wouldn't normally see them do in a game, say, of high risk Manchester United, Man City, that kind of level, it was still worth watching. It's still, and I think Steve McManaman said it in the commentary, it's great to see young guys get senior minutes in their legs. Now, I think he made a really good point in the game. It would be great to see a couple of guys with 9 senior players. It'd be great to see a Doak or a Kate Gordon or any of the fullbacks we played, any of the mids that we played alongside someone who can guide them in Soboslai or an Endo, Endo was already playing, but Harvey Elliott, all these things. Mentioning Harvey, actually, it's worth mentioning this. Harvey is still so young. You could be forgiven for thinking Harvey was one of the youngsters that, whilst he is a little bit older than some of those guys that started this evening, and it was ahead, he has always been ahead of his generation. He was always the best of his class. Kate Gordon, by the way, at one point was the best in his class. The injury has been pretty horrific to him. I don't think we're seeing the best of him at this point, but also I think Liverpool are rehabbing him. I think Liverpool are trying to bring him back to anywhere near his best, and sometimes that's going to take some time. But back to the Harvey Elliott point. Harvey Elliott is, and when you see him around his peers or the other players who, potentially could be kind of people who can be considered in his generation, you see how special he is. You see he's excellent at running with the ball. You see how he is a youngster playing with seniors and looking like the seniors rather than the youngsters. You see the same with Quansah. It's not only perception, it is also just down to their ability. These people are very able at their age. It's why people are so excited about the back two for Arsenal, because they are still so young and able to execute in such a way. It's why people got excited about Trent Alexander-Arnold years ahead of other players. It's why people get excited for players who were young and playing at a very senior level, very young, because they could hold their own. Elliott can clearly hold his own. Lots of these guys are looking to hold their own, but Elliott in particular deserves that kind of credit. By the way, so does Curtis Jones, but he's definitely a different figure within this Liverpool team. Captain the side tonight. Getting the captain's armband is huge for him. Again, Steve McManaman on commentary goes, it seems a bit arbitrary in the fact that he just got it because he's been in the team the longest or whatever. I think it's a bit more than that. I think Klopp is genuinely he's on a bit of a life-changing program for someone like Curtis Jones. It's life-changing to think what Curtis Jones was like a couple of years ago to now. The player, the mentality, the physicality, the judgment, all these things were different to the Curtis Jones we know now. He went away, had a great summer with Liverpool and England, but he went away and had a great summer with England and then Liverpool, came back, became a more senior member of the team, became someone who was looking to be more of a leader, became one of the locals who was coming good, didn't just become one of the locals that was in the squad, possibly because he might come good, but because he was actually doing what the manager asked him to do. And overall, like, you've got to give credit to those kind of things. I think you have to give credit to Curtis. You have to give credit to Harvey. You have to give credit to the young players who are coming through at the moment within this Liverpool side. There are a lot of people who work hard to bring through Liverpool's academy. And a loss like this, sure, might feel like a silly pre-season loss. It meant a lot more to USG than it did to Liverpool. But it's going to be important in the long term in developing some of these guys. As the season goes deeper, as Liverpool's legs begin to tire or begin to need a bit more of a backup or begin to need rotation or whatever you want to call it, some of these guys are going to be called upon. Some of these guys, should Liverpool have injury issues, will be called upon. But it is kind of telling that Liverpool had a very senior or a senior starting 11 with 3 starting midfielders who were those senior midfielders, but the rest of the side was youth. And I think it shows Liverpool are struggling at the moment for youth coming through in that area, right? Obviously, they bought Gravenberch, still very young. Obviously, Cody Gakpo, still relatively young. Obviously, Bajcetic is still to come back. Obviously, they're probably going to go for someone in January. But it wasn't like they were, like crazy blessed in that area. And whilst they did rotate a couple of people on, Harvey Elliott is still young coming through. They were trying to do something at one point with Carvalho, but Carvalho is probably going to be called back from his loan in January because he's barely getting any minutes for RB at the moment. I saw him a couple of weeks ago. He looked relatively low confidence. He was trying to hook up with the other people around him, but it didn't look like someone who was making things work and was a particularly influential loan. Obviously, he's a loan player, so he's not going to be as influential as others, but you get my point, right? So there are plenty of points, there are plenty of pickups from this evening's game. Klopp clearly is still training these guys into his system, is still a positional manager who likes moments of that, whatever you want to call it, relationism, whatever you want to term it as. I'm not 100% sure it is that. It's probably influenced by that, but it's probably more towards the total football than the relation style. Those two are very close linked, right? But the point being, it shows the talent, the reading of the game, the ideas that Klopp is training into these people on a daily basis, right? Slotting into this side so quickly, if you're Gravenberch, Wataru, McAllister, Szoboszlai, Gakpo, any of these new signings, and why it took Nunez such a long time to slot into this side, still a very young striker. Here's what, what was the average age of the team this evening that stepped out there? The average age this evening was 22.4. Much, much below the 26.6 of USG. And a very different formation from USG. They played basically a back 7 with a counter-attacking, speedy, pulling up wide. I can actually look at the average positions of them. Yeah, basically a back 3 and then a 4, which definitely tried to control that midfield. And to an extent, played Klopp quite well, I thought, because Klopp loves to vacate that midfield when he brings on all these people who are changing, and Nunez really spreads the play. Liverpool needed some of that, but at the same time, the midfield kind of gets a bit vacated. They won't, Wataru Endo just sits in the middle there, and that's quite good. But when he leaves, then it's hard to see whether Liverpool truly have midfield control or whether they're just trying to really put pressure on the opposition. And if an opposition was to play through that, what would they then do? We didn't really see that. We just sort of saw everything in the first half, and then USG were very happy to kind of sit back and try to counter on Liverpool. But overall, I wouldn't say it's worrying Liverpool got no chances. We know this team is capable of creating. We know this team is capable of more than just, a couple of shots a game. There will be the games where they get very frustrated this season. There will be games where we go, God, we need Salah, we need Diaz, we need Gakpo, we need Nunez. But none of those were played in great combination this evening. So I wouldn't say that I'm overly worried about that. It looked very pre-season-y to me. I've probably dedicated too many minutes of your life to it. I've definitely dedicated enough minutes of my life to it. But it's still nice to see some of the youngsters. I think a lot of those guys are probably looking at what their position is within the side, wondering how often they'll get to play European football in the future, etc., etc. And I think it's nice to see some of the young guys get a run out. Let me know in the comments below who you were most excited by. I will say, I actually felt pretty excited by, I liked Bradley. I thought it was quite adventurous. I think having a heat map which overall finished up better and further forward than, or as far forward as Trent is fantastic. I think it's great to see Kay Gordon he was like an inside-y kind of striker. It's great to see Harvey Elliott basically playing as like a right 8 or 10, really. Gakpo was sort of all over the place, kind of trying to be a facilitator. I like what Ben Doak did, but, I actually felt like it was Chambers who did more than he did and was definitely... Liverpool kind of used these guys, used Chambers and whoever they want to play as at the right back, but tonight most probably a Bradley, as if you're climbing a mountain, they use those as like the things that you stick in the wall, and then if you fall, then that's the bit you like hang on to. That's what Klopp was looking for from these guys. I think he was looking for very basic tactics. I think he was looking, Harvey Elliott wasn't being all that adventurous. There were a couple of guys who were being cheeky, but not, they didn't feel confident, put it that way. And I felt, I like it. I like watching this Liverpool team anyway. But there were a couple of times like, cool feet, Curtis. Nicely done, Wataru. Drive, Harvey. And you could see the changes made a bit of a difference, but it was never going to be a game where Liverpool really cared about. Let me know in the comments below what you really think or how you're feeling about this Liverpool side. I'm glad they made it through. I don't think they made it all that hard. And you can kind of see how Klopp feels about this competition. The only one he hasn't won, boy, is that guy competitive. I would love to see Liverpool win this season. If I had to choose one, obviously I'd choose the league. But the Europa League, not so bad. Much love. See you guys in a while. Bye. Have a good night.